I played that too, cause everything, I do everything, yeah. Everything, I do everything, yeah. Cause I do this, they gon' do it, they gon' clap. I do this, I do that, and they gon' dance and they gon' clap just because everything.
Go.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 5th edition of the Birdie Brothers podcast. Here alongside me, I got my special co-host here, Luke Hall, and a very special guest today, who we will get into very shortly after our sponsors. Our first sponsor, we want to thank the 4-Putt, where our motto is, I missed, I lipped in. And our other sponsor, a triple bogey on the first hole. Why bother? Give up now. All right, Luke, we'll swing it over to you.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so as you were saying there, today we have our second guest on the Birdie Brothers podcast, the OG Stallion, Mr. Joey Guzzo.
Thank you for having me.
I'm kidding. I got a little
Birdie Brothers. Oh, I get it. That's all I got. I was happy with that.
No, I know you wanted a little intro there. So he is the head strength and conditioning coach here at California State Stanislaus. He manages 14 different sports teams here throughout the year, making sure that everyone is in tip-top shape for their respective sport. Joey studied exercise sports science at Elon University, and then went on to get his master's in educational leadership from St. Francis University. Joey has 10 years of experience working with a variety of university athletic programs, as well as the South Carolina National Guard. I'm excited to talk a little bit about your philosophy on exercise, nutrition, not only as it pertains to athletics, but also just overall health. Yeah, thanks for coming on today, Joey. Taking the time.
Well, my fellas, thanks for having me. I'm happy we're able to get this in as our semester winds down, and just look forward to some good conversation. I know I'm not as world renowned as prior guests, the Vandal from Valencia, Brandon Christensen, but I'll try to I'll try to give the people what they want.
Hey, you got to start somewhere. Maybe after your appearance on this, your fan base will start to grow a little bit.
Hopefully, maybe I can get to 300 Twitter followers. That'd be good.
There we go. Well, so Luke, I don't know if you included it in there, but so Joey is our personal trainer for golf as a part of the CSU Stan program. And Joey, we've been working together for 3 years now, and it's been fun. We just had our last workout, so that was a little bit taking back some memories and some thoughts on what we've gone through, and yeah, unfortunately we haven't had a full 3 years, but but it is what it is. So I guess let's first just get into how you got into fitness and what your goals are in fitness.
So, the way I kind of got into this field, as an undergrad at Elon, I was an athletic training major for my first 3 years. So kind of the other side of it, more of the, dealing with injuries and, basically they're basically like physical therapists, but just, they don't get called physical therapists, but they do a lot of the same work. But it was like, the program itself there was very small and didn't have like a great mentorship within that. We had about 6 people in our program. We were, I graduated in 2009, and 2010 would have been the last class of athletic training as a major at that school. So very small program. And so I just kind of was looking around, converted to exercise science just to be able to graduate on time with a degree. Didn't want to have to go back and take a 5th year or 4.5 year. Just wanted to, finish my degree. And literally when I got done, knew I still wanted to work in some concept of athletics. Wasn't exactly sure what, you guys know me now for about 3 years. I'm not a suit and tie kind of guy. Just doesn't fit me. So I literally Googled, what can I do with an exercise science degree? And couple things popped up in internships and strength and conditioning. I just had a limited background in it, having just, worked with the football team as an athletic trainer at Elon and some other sports, and, just kind of generally worked out with no plan growing up and in college, and kind of studied what you needed to do to pursue this internship, kind of worked to get my certification. And I was fortunate enough to, get a volunteer internship at Missouri State. And then for the spring semester of 2010, and kind of from there it snowballed. I had a really great experience. There was 2 other interns there, but I was only kind of the full-time volunteer. And so I was able to start learning right away. I had a program for sports, understanding technique more, how to program technique, different progressions, the nitty gritty of what we do behind the scenes that spits out a program. So it was just a great experience. And everything kind of just snowballed from there, from, being able to get another internship back home at Hofstra, and then getting a graduate assistantship at St. Francis, where again, it was just me and a head coach that was, had a ton of sports to program for. There's no teacher like experience, especially hands-on experience. So very fortunate to have that, where a lot of other schools, they have GAs that kind of do grunt work. They don't get as much experience. Sometimes they get treated like crap, unfortunately. I think that's a kind of a standard across the board. And I was just fortunate enough along the way to have great mentors and great people who watched out for me and taught me, showed me the ropes. And then just kind of snowballed. And in 2016, kind of started getting a little burned out from coaching. And that's where I kind of transitioned to the South Carolina National Guard position. Was kind of looking for something different. And that was not, it was all as cracked up to be. And we can go into that later. Don't want to speak too negatively to our servicemen and women, but the situation itself, what we were working, wasn't great. And then fortunate enough, had some random connections that led me out here.
So Joey, before you got into or started going to Elon for your undergrad, were you did you play a lot of sports growing up, or were you really into working out, or what made you want to do the athletic?
No, I was always an athlete. Pretty much played soccer my whole life from 4 to 19. Played football from 4th grade on into high school. Played youth basketball just to stay active. A couple years of lacrosse in high school. 1 year of volleyball just to do something in the spring. So kind of just had my hand in the pot all around. I just loved being around, just loved being athletic and doing athletic things. And like I said, I always was interested in just kind of working out. I had cousins who were good athletes and who were, took one cousin in particular, took care of his body really well. He was like an all-state wrestler. And then, had some offers to play some low-level, lacrosse, but wound up going into the Air Force. But so it was kind of just all around. And it's just something I always wanted to just stay healthy. For, to speak personally, I have a lot of obesity in my family, and I knew that was something that I was trying to avoid. Just to live a healthier life, just being around that made me want to myself just be healthy and have longevity in my life. And, obviously I love my family. They make their own choices, but at the end of the day, I just didn't want to have those obesity problems that they ran into as they got older. So that was, part of the driving force behind it. And then, the other driving force I don't speak too much on is when I was about 14. So growing up, my dad was always kind of disabled. Couldn't, he was able to walk and do stuff, but he was a good athlete growing up until he had a brain tumor when he was 16. It kind of left him disabled. And so when I was 14, he actually wound up getting an abscess in his brain, kind of was hospital ridden, bedridden. And so I kind of want to take advantage of being all the things that he was incapable of doing from being in high school on, whether that's, just being active again. And he did, we always play catch, went fishing, whatever, but that's kind of like my why when you talk about my why. So that's always, the passion I have is doing all the things that he was unable to do, and just being able to be grateful to be able to do that. Cause I know firsthand that some people just can't do that. So that's kind of what drove me to staying active and wanting to help others.
Absolutely. That's a great perspective. Yeah, I know that I've taken for granted some of the workouts that we've had are just being able to be active it's such a blessing to still be able to do what I love to do. And so, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about any specifics with nutrition that you've been taught or have been part of your regimen. Is that of like as much importance as exercise to you, or is it just like something else that you kind of know about? You know what I'm saying?
As a strength coach, you kind of have to wear various hats. I'm never going to be on the level of a registered dietitian or anything like that. They spent their focus and careers studying specifically the nutrition. There's nutrition sciences, stuff that in terms of biology and physiology that like go beyond my scope of understanding. But I think just having, as a general individual, having a very basic concept of nutrition is super helpful, especially when you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds who are kind of finding themselves, leaving the house for the first time, learning how to do things for themselves on their own. And true. And, I grew up in a single family household where, I had to learn kind of quickly on my own how to take care of myself. My mom went to work. I got myself up to school every day. So, just always being understood of like basic cooking needs, like was just like a big thing for me. I always loved to cook. And I think that's just kind of the missing key with a lot of people. People want like a magic fix and a magic pill. I'm going to drink this shake. I'm going to do this diet. But diets typically have an endpoint, right? And so when they say diet, I always want to talk about habits. How can we change our habits and create lifelong habits? And it doesn't have to be big wholesale changes right away, but just learning basic things. What should I make for breakfast? How do I, some people don't know how to cook an egg. So maybe you start there. Just learning the basics of, what's good, what's bad. I don't think is a great way to say it. Is like, I think you hear it all the time, everything in moderation and in proportion to what your needs are. And it's, just like everything else, it's so individually based. What I need as, a 33-year-old person who kind of is pretty active and works out is way different than a, 21-year-old collegiate athlete. And then the nutritional needs for a golf is going to be different than the nutritional needs for a football player, for a soccer player, male, female, it doesn't matter. So you just kind of take all those things you count. And, as a coach, I just try to give broad advice. And then hopefully as you grow as a person, you can adapt those to your needs.
Yeah.
You have any,
yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
So working with all these student athletes, do you see a lot of, do you see a need to kind of guide them when it comes to nutrition, or like do you see like a big gap in knowledge, and if so, how would you suggest like a typical student athlete who didn't grow up in a family that was relatively healthy per se goes out and like learns how to eat healthy for their particular sport? Like, do you have, obviously like you can search on YouTube and you get a million results, but do you have any like podcasts or maybe like short little books that kind of give you those basics? Or
I think, you can listen, the internet is a wonderful and evil place all at the same time, because you can find any information to fit what you're looking for. You can probably find something to refute everything I just told you, and you can find everything to support what I just told you, right? It goes both ways. So it's really hard, I think, right now for a lot of people in general when it comes to health and fitness, because everybody's an expert, and it's really hard to sift through the bullshit to know what's right and what's wrong per se. But I think, to me, honestly, it just comes down to making very simple choices. If you gave somebody the choice between an apple and a bag of Cheetos, most people are going to pick a bag of Cheetos, and maybe not just because they like apples, because the Cheetos just seem more convenient, or they taste better, or that's just, so it's, the stupid marketing ploy of Chester Cheeto is stuck in their head, as opposed to grabbing that apple. Or they might not think the apple is filling or whatever it is. So it's getting people to understand that, like, not all things are good and bad. It's just varying degrees of good and bad, I suppose. But I mean, just trying to educate people, one thing at a time, right? We can't make, like I said, you can't make wholesale changes. If someone is eating, whatever, a bag of potato chips and some crappy foods for dinner, but they're maybe for lunch, they're, having some chicken and some fruit and salad. So let's highlight the things that they do well. Let's talk about the things that they are eating well, and let's expand upon that. Okay, you like chicken and rice and salad, but you're kind of getting bored of that, and that's why maybe you're eating something crappy for dinner, or you're skipping breakfast. And that, I mean, to me, I think that's the biggest thing I'm seeing with a lot of collegiate athletes, is that skipping breakfast. A lot of things aren't true, but the truest thing is, like, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. So I think just starting there, and breakfast isn't a Pop-Tart and a swig of Gatorade, right? Just understanding why you're fueling. Like, I think the best analogy you can kind of give any athlete or any person is, you hear this all the time if you do listen to some nutrition talks, is, if a NASCAR driver, F1 driver is starting a race, what's the fuel level in their car? Do they start on a half a tank, quarter tank, or do they start their race with a full tank? Mm-hmm. The answer would hopefully be a full tank, right? So if you take every day as a race and you take breakfast as you're fueling up, if you skip breakfast, you're typically starting your day on a half tank or a quarter tank. And it's really hard to then get that tank full by the time you need that gasoline, essentially. So getting people to understand the importance of meals, what's consistent in that meal. And people think eating healthy has to be expensive, and I don't necessarily agree with that. There's, always ways to eat on a budget. It just takes the time to actually look, walking around the grocery store, seeing things that are on sale, or buying things that are, whether your chicken breast, chicken thighs typically run a little cheaper than your cuts of red meat. Pork is a good substitute. And I think a lot of it too is, kids aren't taught preparation skills. Food preparation, they might like certain foods, but they're afraid to learn how to prepare them. They've never been taught for whatever reason. And I think that's maybe where our school systems have failed a lot of our kids. And, we've done things in the past here at Stan. We've been fortunate enough to have our chef on campus do some food preparation type classes and put out some videos to kind of help people guide through that. So I think the first step is just kind of learning basic preparations of, like, how to just turn on an oven and use it. Like, people just generally things that they may not know how to do. And that's why I think they revert back to, like Luke said, the way they grew up, which is, something out of a box, something out of a can, or like just very carb heavy, because it's, boiling water and throwing pasta in there and then whatever. So, there's a lot of components that go into it, but I think it could be made very simple if people just took the time to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that I found was difficult with me, especially at first. And I still fall into the trap of, like, thinking that fast food or something that I can get in a bag or a pouch is, like, easier, more efficient, like, doesn't cause me as much trouble in the morning or throughout my day. Mm-hmm. To have to go through preparing actual food. But what I noticed though is I have to take like responsibility for what I'm buying when it comes to, like, produce or meats, things like that will expire, because I find myself having a hard time once I buy it. It's like, okay, it's here. In my head, I'm like, all right, I'm going to make this, but then I might set it off. And so that's where you start losing money. It's like a college student or anybody. It's like, I can find things that are easier to make, but I just have to take the time out of my day to actually make this stuff. And it's so much better for you, obviously. But it's also interesting what you said about breakfast in the morning. That's been a hot topic, I think, especially in the past, like, I don't know, like 10 years or something like that. But I've listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of, I've done some research myself on what would be the best way to start my day dietary wise. I've been doing a little bit of fasting, and I found that to be effective for me, just to kind of lower like my blood sugar levels and like kind of keep it constant. But yeah, there's all different kinds of thoughts. What's more beneficial for you, to eat breakfast in the morning or to go on a fast or something like that. And I think that's where information and knowledge is a little bit, it's a double-edged sword, and you can get in that trap of thinking, well, I don't really know what to do on my diet, so I'm just going to go with the flow, and that's not very conducive for especially a college athlete who wants to perform at the top of their game. So I think consistency is a big thing. Consistency, and getting the proper nutrients, not constantly eating the same, being consistent, but not constantly eating the same products, especially if they come out of a bag. If it's a bag of greens, that's different. But
right.
But yeah, I agree with you on that. It's because I wasn't very good when I first got to college in making my own stuff and making food. I didn't cook a whole lot when I was back at home, so that was like a new thing for me. But you gotta dive into it, because I mean, I got what, like 60 plus more years to figure out how I'm gonna make myself some food. So I might as well start making good habits, right?
That's right. Yeah, Luke, anything from your perspective of what you've gone through?
I mean, yeah, like I have my first meal at noon. Like I don't eat breakfast.
Same. Yeah.
So it's like, and because I read this book called The Circadian Code. It's by this guy named Sachin Panda. He's like a PhD guy, and he basically talks about the natural like circadian rhythm of our bodies, and like all the benefits of. He goes into sleep and then like when you eat, and his main argument, like the thesis of the book, is timing is everything. So they do these experiments on like rats where the rats can eat throughout the day, just whenever they want, and then they measure that, and then they have another pool of rats where they only let them eat for like 8 hours or 6 hours, and they let them eat whatever they want in that 6-8 hours, like same calories, more calories, doesn't matter. And then they find that they're less susceptible to gain weight. All these diseases start to kind of like mitigate to an extent, and the so-called benefits are manifold. Like you can go and like read the book and see like all these things that he talks about, and some of them are just correlation. I don't think you could say any of them are 100% causation, but for me, I've found that it has helped. Once I got used to it, the first couple, I started doing it at the beginning of quarantine because I listened to a podcast and read the book, but it took a little time, and since then I've kind of learned why, and the reason why I think is because your body's so used to just getting pounded with food, breakfast, lunch, dinner, that once you stop eating, like say breakfast and maybe lunch, then your body's just not used to it. It's not used to pulling the stored fats. It's just used to feeding off carbs, like because that's what you eat, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the keto diet. But I haven't really experimented too much with that. But I mean, yeah, it's just like I'm not the type of guy to be like, oh yeah, intermittent fasting is the way to go. I'm just like, I like experimenting with things like that, and but obviously like when I was biking over quarantine quite a bit, I had to eat before I bike. But like if I know I'm just going to be like say studying throughout the morning, I just won't eat and just kind of let my body just like feed off of stored energy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I think there's a super fine line there, kind of like you said, because at some point your body will always go back to survival mode, and, you know, it'll store the things you are eating, because it doesn't know when its next meal is coming. And then the first thing it'll pull from is muscle, because that typically burns the most calories as needed, you know, for use. So I think there's like a super fine line. And again, it's all individually based. You know, I couldn't see that being, you know, the term fasting in itself. I just can't see that being beneficial over time for, you know, different. I mean, I guess it's sport and person dependent, but, you know, for a sport that, you know, that requires multiple bursts and, you know, a different level of fitness than say golf does, if we're speaking like that, then I don't see it as beneficial. But for someone who is, you know, a recreational athlete at some point, it could work. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer for it works. I just always wonder what's going on physiologically inside. Is, you know, if the scale is going down, is that, you know, what's actually happening? If, you know, if people are interested in that, you know, I think in that book, or if they're talking about it, are they doing, you know, scans of the humans or the subjects in that with like changes in, you know, their percent body fat, their musculoskeletal system or anything like that? Are they doing any sort of those physiological changes, or what are they saying through that?
Yeah, they are. And it's a relatively new field. Like, I think that was like the first big book that came out, like the popular one that kind of took off. But I think right now, like, the jury's still out, but the consensus is if you start fasting, for the first, like, however many months, depending on the person, since your body's not used to it, since your body's not used to going and using the stored energy, then it's going to start to eat away at your muscles. But then once you become, they call it metabolically flexible, where you're able to go use like ketones and stored fat for energy, then you're going to keep your muscle. But that takes time. And which, you know, some people, if you're an athlete, like, you got to time it accordingly. But yeah, like, it's mostly just like long term, like there's just lists of like all these diseases that could be mitigated, by giving your body basically time to rejuvenate, essentially.
Right. Now, who are the subjects in this study, right? If you're taking someone who is sedentary and non-active, that's going to be way different than someone who's, you know, mildly active compared to someone who's, you know, an athlete in some capacity, college, pro, low level, amateur, whatever. Who are the subjects that they're studying? I'm just more curious.
Yeah, mostly mice, and then everything else is just kind of small scale. Whoever wants to participate, humans, then the rest is just anecdotal. But another like main argument is, like, our ancestors, like hunter-gatherers, they evolved to eat and then not eat, and then like eat, like overeat, and then go for like days of not eating because they couldn't find food. So it's like the term like hungry mindset. Like, there's a reason that it was coined. It's because it goes back to hunter-gatherers who couldn't necessarily find food. So the hungrier they got, the more alert they got, and the more kind of engaged and motivated they got to go, you know, kill an animal or something.
Yeah, I think we're a far cry from that now. And, you know, but I think everything else, like, time in your body adapts to, like, our needs now are way different than our needs of our ancestors. And, like, you know, if people went days without eating now, I'm not sure if it would be good or bad. I guess it depends on the person. But it's a really interesting take on it. And said, don't know enough about it to comment. It's just more curiosity than anything. I don't, philosophically, doesn't jive with me, but that doesn't mean I'm right or wrong. You know, different strokes for different folks. So I think it's interesting either way to toy around with it, and anything to increase your longevity and get yourself living longer. I mean, I'm all for.
Yeah. It's super interesting for sure.
Yeah. I don't mean to just kind of end this conversation, but to move in a little different direction, since we are a golf podcast here. Let's talk about. So Joey, I went to River Oaks with you about 2 months ago. Yeah, you're starting up the game. How's the journey going? How you liking golf thus far?
I mean, it's a beautiful frustration, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're just like anything, like, you know, when you're playing out by yourself on the range, you think you're freaking out, like, I got this shit dialed in, and you all of a sudden you put yourself on a tee box and not as wide open of the situation, and you're going, what happened? What did I do wrong here? So I think I find it super fascinating. The more I played, research, watch videos, understand the game more, of just like obviously it's highly technical, which I find extremely, extremely fascinating. I think most sports in themselves are highly technical. And, you know, seeing a lot of great athletes over the course of time of first, you know, gives you a really greater appreciation of how difficult a lot of these sports are and how easy a lot of people make them look. And I think golf's that one sport that everybody watches on TV and be like, that shit's easy, I can do it. And then they go out, you know, you're going to watch, I think we talked about this, I can go out and watch, you know, an NBA game and see somebody dunk from the free throw. I'm like, yeah, I can never do that in my wildest dreams. But I go and watch a golf tournament and be like, that guy just pimped one, you know, 200. That looked pretty easy. All he did was swing a club. And then you get out there and just realize the sheer amount of technical aspects of a golf swing, which I find fascinating. So just understanding that, and, you know, gives me a better feel for what happens in a golf swing as I study it more and more. And it's fun. I like it. It's frustratingly enjoyable. It's 4 minutes of frustration or 4 minutes of joy and 4 hours of work. So.
Wait, so golf's a sport?
Sure, if you consider it a sport. I
thought it was a game.
Yeah. I mean, how you guys play it is a sport, right? In the sense of the collegiate setting, the professional setting, it's definitely a sport, right? Clear, defined set of rules. You know, there's winners and there's losers, right? As literally defined by your score. As you know, Brandon would say, it's not a sport because technically there's no defense, but I think as we said, the defense itself is the course, or your mind.
Or your mind. Yeah, that's a good one. Well, it depends on where you're thinking. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But, you know, for a recreational golfer like me, I don't think it's a sport for me. It's a sport for you all who play it, again, at a level where there's tournaments, rules, regulations, winners and losers. Me, I'm always the loser no matter what when we're out there, but, you know, I'm not 100% playing by the rules. I try to as much as I can, but it's, you know, inevitably as a recreational golfer, you're never going to.
But Joey, I heard you're going for the senior tour.
I mean, I still got 17 years. So
I know. Yeah. So we gotta get that competitive spirit up. We gotta get that sport. Yeah. But yeah, we want to talk a little bit about what are the barriers of golf, or like what are some stigmas that people coming into the game, what is associated with it, and how you think that those can change, or what you see, what do you see that could be altered by that's just perception of the game, you know?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, you know, people say when you train golf is like, oh, golfers, you know, don't need to work out or train or be fit. And, you know, as I think you guys can say firsthand, it's like, you know, I think there's always a misconception that we talk about, you know, people don't want to get like strong, you know, people associate strength with size, right? And bulk, and then they associate bulk with inflexibility. And that's like, obviously, and paramount in golf is being flexible and mobile, because the swing in itself happens in like multiple planes of motion, but you're fixed on the ground. I just find that super fascinating, where it's, you know, there's so many moving parts to a golf swing. So I think the barrier is understanding that like fitness isn't important for golf. And I don't think you need to be able to be a good golfer. You don't necessarily have to be the strongest, the fastest, the most explosive. You don't need to be able to run, X amount of miles. But what I think a base level of fitness does is confidence. You're just confident that you just feel better, right? You're just confident in your body. You're confident in your swing. You're confident in yourself. And then, stepping out on the course and feeling confident is a pretty big importance to the sport if you're playing it at the high level. I think being fit in and of itself is, how do we explain this? Okay, if the fitter you are, the more you can sustain the longevity of a round, right? It's golf is super mentally taxing at the high level, whether it be the collegiate, professional, amateur level. It's very mentally taxing, and that wears on you physically, right? That mental strain wears on you physically. But if you're in better physical condition, you can be able to handle that mental taxation more, at least in my opinion. So just being in a better physical spot, I think, will help your mental game, because you're not going to think about being tired, or you're not going to think about your swing breaking down. You're thinking about your mechanics. You're just going to feel confident that, over this 4 hours, I can stay dialed in for my 72 to 75 swings or whatever it is, or, between putting and swinging, and staying dialed in. So I think just being physically fit just helps that mental part of your game. And then, golf in itself, requires a lot, like I said, a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things going on in the body, and when they're in that 1.5 seconds that it takes to swing a club, whether it's various degrees of internal and external rotations of certain joints, obviously rotation over what we call the transverse plane, right? That actual backswing, downswing situation happens in the transverse plane, but there's things going on between the hip, knee, ankle, shoulder, back through that swing. So just almost bulletproofing your body to sustain the rigors of that violent motion repeatedly, right? In a round of golf, you're only swinging at best, 18 times off the tee, a couple of tee shots, and then you're putting, which is in itself not violent. It's more the mental part of it, the putting. So, but being able to repeat that over, and having that repeatability over 4 hours and 4 days on the pro tour, or 2 rounds in 1 round for the collegiate way that we play, we're playing 2 rounds in 1 day, I think is, you have to have a baseline level of physical fitness to be just carrying your bag and walking that 14, 15 miles between the 2 rounds, right? Just being able to, again, if you don't have to worry about feeling tired, then all you have to do is worry about your game. So I think that the misnomer that golfers don't need to be physically fit is, and I think it's slowly changing as you see the body types of guys and women, even now on the LPGA and PGA tour, you see the body types changing a little bit.
That's a great point about like how you approach the game kind of makes all the difference. Because if you think about it, it's probably over, I would say maybe 95% of golfers aren't at that, or maybe 90% aren't at that point where they're actually competing and like have that level of like dedication, I guess, towards the game. So like for 90 whatever percent of golfers who are just kind of playing it casually, like it doesn't have to be viewed as a sport. Like it can just be like, I don't have to prep at all. I'll just kind of get out there and drink some beer and hit the ball around. Right. But so you talk about like being in shape for golf could have many benefits. You were kind of alluding to just for less of a mental tax, and then also just staying like you're walking 4 days. The tour guys are just playing like week after week, and being in shape just definitely overall helps. Right. But there's also the actual bulking and like an attempt to hit the ball far. Right. So if you look at Bryson, who I'm sure you've been paying attention to, he's basically getting big to hit the ball far. Like it's less of a overall like I'm trying to be in really good shape. It's more of just like I'm trying to blow up so I can hit it past these boys. So my question to you is, we talked about this on a couple, on like our second or third podcast. So this guy, Matthew Fitzpatrick, he took a small little jab at Bryson. I don't know if you saw this, but I'll read it here. I got it. He, in an interview, someone asked him about like what he thinks of Bryson putting on all these pounds and hitting it so far. And he said, quote, "It's not a skill to hit the ball a long way, in my opinion. I could put on 40 pounds. I could go and see a biomechanist, I believe that's how you say it, and I could gain 40 yards. That's actually a fact. I could put another 2 inches on my driver. I could gain that. But the skill, in my opinion, is to hit the ball straight. That's my skill. He's just taking the skill out of it, in my opinion, by getting big and just mashing it." So what would you say to that? What's your opinion on that?
You know, they're both successful golfers. You know, I'm not as in tune to golf as you guys, but I don't know if Matthew Fitzpatrick's ever won a major. So, you know, obviously he's good enough to stay on tour, and obviously it's helped Bryson. And, you know, I think that, you know, if that's Bryson's game, that's great. And it works for him. It doesn't mean Fitzpatrick has to emulate it. Does he have to like it? No. And that shouldn't affect Bryson's mindset at all. If that's what he thinks is going to help him be successful, then, you know, who's to stop him from doing it? And I disagree with Fitzpatrick there when he says it's not a skill to be able to hit the ball far. I think it is a skill. It's, you know, this isn't a long drive competition in the PGA Tour by any means, but, you know, it's a skill if you can control it. Like you said, if you're just spraying it all, if you're hitting it 340, but you're freaking, you know, hitting it left, right, not even remotely near the fairway, then maybe reevaluate your skill set. But if you can learn to hone that skill to where you're bombing it straight down every time, then who's to say it's not beneficial. And again, the golf swing itself is what involved the stretch shortening cycle, right? That's that like elastic property of just like boom, boom, like think of it like a rubber band. So the harder you're swinging, the more violence you're putting on your body. So Bryson actually probably needs that strength and that size to just be able to sustain the forces that he's creating with that swing. And so like Fitzpatrick said, he can put on 40 pounds and learn how to swing harder. But yeah, you probably need to put on those 40 pounds to be able to swing that hard, to just for your body to be able to sustain that. And so going back to your question, you know, if that's how he feels, he's entitled to his opinion. He's a pro golfer. What he's doing has gotten him this far. What Bryson felt he was doing wasn't working. He wanted us to reevaluate his whole approach to the game, and it's, you know, worked out for him more or less thus far. So, again, golf's one of those unique sports where, you know, body types of all can be successful: short, long, thin, thick, big, skinny. It's, you know, it's a highly, you know, if you can fit your swing to your physiological or anatomical skill set, you're going to be in a better spot. So Bryson has the frame to handle that 40 pounds. He's a big hoss to begin with. Fitzpatrick, if I recall, you know, Fitzpatrick's more of an average size guy. Him putting on 40 pounds, I'm actually, the more I think about it, I'm not sure his frame would support that. Bryson just has a bigger frame. You know, he's probably, I venture Bryson's what, 6'3" ish.
I think he's 6'2".
6'2", 6'3", but just, you know, we have the ectomorphs, the mesomorphs, and whatever that one. You know, Bryson's more of a broad-framed kind of fella where you can, you know, sustain putting on 40 pounds and it's not going to affect him. Where if Fitzpatrick put on 40 pounds, you know, he'd look like a roly-poly.
Yeah. I remember Justin Thomas got asked about it, and the way the interviewer framed the question was like, well, Bryson just put on 40 pounds of muscle. Like, would you ever consider doing that or something like that? And JT was like, well, I don't think it's definitely not 40 pounds of muscle. Like, there might be like 20 or 30, but there's definitely some plump.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I mean, he's gained all this weight in muscle or plump or whatever you want to call it, but he's still very mobile. He's very flexible. And I think that was the key. And Joey, you can chime in here, but I remember doing some research on his trainer. I forget his name right now. I should have it written down, but He basically revamped Bryson's workout regimen by changing fundamentally at the start his mobility and his stability within his muscles and his joints. And that's where he started first. He started from the ground up, and then he gained all that muscle. And I don't know. It's interesting because I was really curious. Bryson's this big. He's swinging so hard at it. I mean, I would think that the thought of injury might come into play, but I think it was really smart not to just jump straight into the weights, because you're going to lose mobility and flexibility within that if you're to just start by putting on the weight. So for people who do want to get stronger and do want to start popping the ball a little further, what are the first steps that people need to take in order to be successful and have longevity in that?
I think I didn't read. That's what how Bryson approached it. I'd imagine that's any coach worth their salt would have done it. But movement fundamentals is the first key, or movement quality, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then it took him several months and years to get like this, but first starting with like an assessment of okay, where do your struggle, taking that person's swing, seeing where the issues are in their swing, and then giving them an assessment of like what's their mobility in X, Y, and Z, or their range of motion in X, Y, and Z. And then from there, you structure your program of just like, okay, let's work on the fundamentals of just movement quality, whether it's a full range of motion squat, it's a improvement in our, rotational mobility of like, how far can I rotate this way comfortably? For me, I'm a left-handed, so I'm going left first, but obviously right-handed golfers, how far can we get this way? You're only going to go as far as your front side shoulder and your lats kind of allow you. So if you're stiff and you can't even get that shoulder all the way across, okay, that's an issue. How do we address that? Then being able to create that rotation. So there's so many assessments that you can do, and each be dialed in. Some of them I probably don't even recognize or know about, but I think just understanding, the limitations first of that individual, and then, creating, like you said, strength through that range of motion, and then maintaining that as you put on size. Just because you're bulky doesn't mean you have to be mobile. If you look at world-class Olympic lifters, okay, people competing in the Olympics in the clean and jerk and in the snatch, especially on the people who compete on the heavier side, they are big people, but within their sport, they have incredible range of motion to be able to, go ass to grass with a 500-pound clean, keeping their, elbows up and then pressing it overhead and making sure their shoulders are stable. That's just like a kind of analogy of you can be strong and mobile for your sport if it's done right.
Yeah. His name
Long
is
and strong.
His name, by the way, the trainer of DeChambeau, Greg Roskopf. So if you want to look him up, I've seen some interviews with him and actually read some of his philosophy on training, and it's really interesting.
Yeah. It said, and it works for Bryson. Just because it works for him doesn't mean it's going to work for anybody else on the tour. But I think it's a fascinating mindset to have, and I think it really challenges the traditions of golf, which is a very traditional sport in the sense of like they're very set on X, Y, and Z rules. Whether it's from a looks standpoint of the collared shirt and the pants and this and that, to being very humble. And I think a lot of people just are traditionalists, and I think he's just bucking the trend. And that's also, he has a rough personality, or he's kind of a unique personality. And so people are always trying to poke holes in that, but I think it's fascinating. I think it brings great attention to the game. Kind of like, if you think how Steph Curry kind of revolutionized shooting threes in the NBA, Bryson is revolutionizing in a sense, the professional approach to the game. Tiger kind of did that when he kind of got super jacked and fit. And I think he's the one who really, really brought, fitness to the forefront of golf. You can look back at the older players, Jack you see old pictures of Nicholson. He was pretty cut up. Palmer, pretty ripped cut dude. they were probably just more man strength. They were probably out cutting trees, doing yard work and baling hay, as opposed to, actually doing, for lack of a term, workout routine. So, but yeah, I think there's a ton of opportunity in the sport to improve just even the basic fundamentals of strength. I think can go a long way.
Oh, I was just saying too.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see in 10 years where Bryson's going to be, because as my favorite commentator Brandon Chambly points out, anyone who's ever gone on this path of lifting weights and getting big and transforming their body effectively has come down with, major injuries, 5-10 years, somewhere in that span, like Brooks, Tiger, Jason Day, all these guys. And to play, I know Ben and I have talked about this, but somewhere there's a video out there of Bryson performing a squat or a clean, or not a clean, a deadlift or something like that. And there's a guy, like a legit personal trainer, who's basically saying that's crappy form. So I don't know. I know this guy that Ben's talking about is known to be, super calculated and everything has kind of got a purpose behind it, or a method to the madness, so to speak. But it's there's a fine line, right? If you're doing one of those exercises with the amount of weight that he's pushing, if you're doing those slightly off in form, and then you're going and playing a bunch of golf, who knows where you're going to be 10 years, but it'll be interesting to see.
I 100% agree. The amount of violence in his swing is, it puts a lot of stress across all sorts of aspects of the human body. It's fascinating. I agree. It's going to be interesting in 5 to 10 years to see how he physically holds up.
And that kind of goes back to the what you were talking about, how golf is so it's not very open to change, and it's everything's kind of stays the same. Golf's always been, it's the game you can play for your whole life. And these guys on tour have 20, 30, 35 onto the Champions Tour year careers. So it's maybe that's changing to the point where maybe a guy only has 10 years or 15 years for his prime, because he's eventually going to get injured with the heavy training he's going to be doing. It's kind of like baseball. This is my favorite analogy is, if a guy starts hitting dingers because he's been in the gym pushing a bunch of weight, no one's going to call him out for pushing weight like Fitzpatrick. That's just part of the game.
Right.
It's almost like golf is just kind of finally making its way up to that point where people are training to perform better.
Yeah. You heard Rory say it a while ago that it got into his head, right? It goes back to the mental game too. It's getting in guys' heads. And if that's also probably giving him an advantage. Rory missed a couple of cuts because he was trying to bomb it off the tee, and he's a bomber off the tee to begin with, but he was trying to, bomb at 340, and it got in his head. And so I think that goes back to changing the game too. It's changing how other players are mentally approaching the game. Maybe not their physical preparation, but in the heat of the moment, it's a competition at the end of the day. I find that part fascinating as well. It's how his performance, and he's not saying, it's just what he's doing is physically affecting other guys in the heat of the moment in competition.
So Joey,
sorry, I got to go to the bathroom real quick. You guys just, I'll be right back.
Okay, no worries, dude. We'll keep it going.
Just bring us with you.
So Joey, in your personal experience and expertise, what are some fundamental exercises that are most beneficial for golfers? Researched.
So I think one of the biggest things is first understanding that person's limitations. And I can tell you to do a hex bar deadlift, but if you can't properly posture yourself and get into that position, it's not going to work. But we're taking someone who's, let's just say we'll under the assumption that you can do the sheer basics in the weight room. I think, so I'll ask you this question and then I'll give you an answer. Where does the golf swing start and end?
Well, it starts with the takeaway, but it depends.
Okay, but where are your
body?
Where are your feet?
Your feet are on the ground.
Okay, so everything is transferred through the ground, ground reaction.
Absolutely.
And that's our base, right? So think in enhancing your base. That's why I think a trap bar deadlift or a hex bar, however you want to call it, is just a phenomenal tool to help strengthen our base, right? Where all the force is transmitted from, back to front or front to back to front, basically on the swing or back to front. So I think a hex bar, trap bar deadlift is a great tool in developing that foundation of strength in that position. And then, any sort of, again, just because something in the weight room is never always going to translate directly to the sport. And that holds true, for every sport. But I think just doing the basics in the weight room. So like a squat or a pull, in this case, we said we'll use the deadlift as our pull, the hex bar deadlift as our lower body pull. I would say a press, okay, a press would be something vertical. So any sort of I think doing anything like single arm or landmine pressing, which we've done, just kind of mimics the force or the instability that's created in a golf swing, because the shoulders at some capacity are involved in the backswing and the downswing takeaway, and then a push. So any sort of push motion, whether it's some sort of dumbbell bench, a push up, and variations. Again, the pecs involved in the golf swing. And then our posterior chain. So we've kind of hit it with the deadlift, but any sort of single leg hamstring work, hip work, and groin, all involved. So I think, again, the basics for any program is, for me, is called push, squat, push, press, pull, and hinge. Okay, 5 things. Okay. And then, there's variations on how you do each of them. You just got to cater it to the type of sport that it is. Most of the sports can train in a similar fashion. It's just manipulating the load, the intensity within those movements. And you're going to have to set, especially if you're taking someone with a very low training age in the weight room. They might have a high golf age, but a very low training age. Just doing very simple, basic things well is going to provide dividends early on. And then as you continue to work with that individual, you're going to need to make manipulations to that training program to continue that progression. Make sure we're maintaining all the things that are critical to the golf swing, in which case that'd be our range of motion through shoulders and hips, our ability to transfer weight from front to back, and our ability to just repeat that over and over successfully. I like how you talked about it all starts from the lower body or from the ground up, right? Mm-hmm. But in golf, it's almost every muscle is being used. It's like golf is one of those sports where you have to be fit everywhere, and it's a whole kinetic chain, right? Yep. And one interesting thing I wanted to bring up is that I don't know if you've experienced this in your own golf, but when you play and when you practice and when you go to the range and you're hitting balls, your body always feels different, especially if you're working out. If you're working out and you're trying to get stronger, you're trying to get more mobile, your body is always changing in how it feels. And golf is a big sport on feel. So if your feels are always changing, it's really difficult to adapt and be aware mentally of what's going on with your body at the time, because then your swing can change without you even knowing it. So I guess for people that are concerned about if lifting or if getting stronger would be an issue for golf, because I think that's an issue that people think of. Bryson is an example of someone who just said, screw that, I'm just gonna freaking get better with the best scientists and the best biomechanic work I can. But for people who are worried that, because that is a big issue, that your feels are going to go and that you're going to be more volatile and not as consistent because you're working out, are there ways to attack that, or are there? It's a really, really good question, Ben. I will say that your body is a very unique organism, and it adapts to everything. And it will adapt to anything without you even knowing. I look at it as, we'll use another sport, for example, that's had a stigma of size, or a position within a sport that's had a stigma on like size and strength. That would be pitching in baseball. People are like, oh, you can't be bulky and be able to throw a baseball. Your body can't do that. But your body mechanics will adapt with the changes as you go. So, you're not going to go from 6 foot 170 to 6 foot 205 overnight, right? It's going to happen over the course of months to years, depending on what your end game is. And your body, as your body goes through those changes of gaining weight, gaining mass, as long as you're maintaining other things, your body will adapt to it. And your swing may feel different. That's just because your body is different, but it's probably not going to change. And if you're still consistent, with how you're striking it, what you're trying to do, I don't think it's an issue. And I think also it goes back to the mental part. Like, if you're convincing yourself that something's going to be wrong if you change it, then you're going to convince yourself that even if something's not going on, that something's happening. Or, all of a sudden you start chunking the ball. It's like, oh, I got too strong. I'm not mobile enough. When maybe it's just like you thought that happened, and then thus you put it into the universe and it happened, as opposed to, your body just going through and adapting, which it does. It's a very adaptive organism. And, as we talked about several segments ago about the hunter-gatherer types and how their bodies adapted to their style of eating and necessity, your body is going to adapt to the physiological changes that you impose on it from a training standpoint. And, your swing will change with it. And, from the highest level of pros, they're fortunate enough that they can go and get new clubs to fit that change, or they can change their club at a whim to fit their kind of new swing. If you even look at golfers whose bodies haven't changed, they've gone through how many different swing changes over the course of a career because something wasn't working. How many times did you hear a swing coach gets fired, or guy hired a new swing coach, or guy changed club brands, and their body types didn't really change. So I think organically things are going to change as you get older. All right, your body's just going to lose something, or if you train it, you're going to change something. And then if you're fortunate enough to be able to adapt to those changes with new equipment, I think is the biggest thing. But then if not, you kind of have to, just if you're a recreational golfer, then why do you even care? Like, what's the point? If you're a high level golfer, then there's conversations to be had of, don't get in your own head, right? That's the biggest thing with golf. Just get out of your head. But if you think that it's going to happen, then you're already predispositioned to think any changes are going to be negative. But if you think it is like, this is only going to help improve my game, I'm going to adapt to this, then you're putting yourself in that mindset of, I'm going to adapt to the changes that my body is going through, and I will adjust my, tactics, technique accordingly. Does that make sense?
Sure. But the issue is that I've experienced firsthand either being in a tournament or doing qualifying as a team and having just worked out the day before or been working out a certain area more than others. And I can feel it like in my golf swing, and it actually affects my swing and the shot that I produce. So it's an interesting give and take. I think you have to understand that if you are going through that process, that there are going to be changes, and you can't expect to feel the same things.
Right.
So I think that's important to understand. Luke, do you want to shed some light on that, or do you want to keep going there and your experience with working out in golf?
Well, I think this takes me back to, so the school I was at previously, we didn't have any workout regimen or we didn't have a personal trainer or strength and conditioning coach rather, and we just played golf, and then some of us went to the gym on our own time. But then kind of halfway through the second year I was there, we wanted to or the coaches were trying to kind of get us together and start doing like an actual formal get together and do a formal like workout plan per se. And I remember we were having a meeting and we were talking about this. Everyone was like I don't want to be out, during a tournament, feeling tight or, feeling kind of off because I'm not used to working out. And I was just like, because at that point, like I work out like every day. So I was like, if you work out every day, it's like you're not really gonna get sore.
Yeah, to an extent.
And it's
right.
yeah, and I don't know if I was gonna ask you about this, Joey. Good thing this came up because I probably would have forgotten. But the philosophy of never getting sore, like if you can do 10 pull-ups maxed out, like if I put a gun to your head, you couldn't do more than 10 pull-ups, then just doing 5 a day, to the point where if you work out 5 days a week, you've got 25 pull-ups, versus if you do 10 on Monday, you got to take a 2-day break because you're sore, you're only doing 20. Like what's your philosophy on that? Like working out every day and not pushing yourself to its absolute max, or having like, working out every other day or 3 times a week and going hard, and then having a recovery day where you're sore, obviously dependent on your golf schedule and what
Right.
you can make work.
Again, I think it's so individually based, right? If you're, we were kind of talking about this, if you take someone with a 0 training age or very young, low limited, they could be 18, 19, but their training age is probably pretty young, right? If they've never really been in a weight room. So, anything that you're going to do is going to make them sore, unless you're doing just like very basic limited volume, but like even just the minimal amount is going to make them sore. So I think it's starting slow to get to the end point. If you're someone who can handle those loads, then you can then handle it. If it's not going to affect you, if the soreness is your concern, it's if you're new to something, it's going to happen. It's just inevitable. Like it's unavoidable. It doesn't like, you shouldn't always seek to be sore first of all, like then you can never recover. But those initial stages, it's going to happen. But if you're playing a tournament on Friday and you're new to working out or training for golf, like your last training session should probably be at the latest Wednesday, right? To give yourself 48 hours to get through any soreness that you probably would incur from this new training. But the more you do something, the more your body adapts to it. And then you can slowly make those progressions. And you don't need to necessarily make, like I said, you don't need to make like huge strength gains in golf. Like strength is absolute or it's relative. Absolute strength being pushing PRs, which we don't need to do for golf. It's not necessary. But if you can go from, if you only deadlifted 135 for 5 and that's all you can do, and then 6 weeks later you can do 135 for 5 sets of 5, you got stronger. Hands down, you got stronger, and your body adapted to that. Now that 135 probably wouldn't make you sore. And then we might have to, then you cycle it back, and now I want to try to do 155. So maybe you only do 155, and you want to, you can only do it for 5 reps, and over the course of the next 6 weeks, you get to 155, 165 for your 5 sets of 5. And then if you have a very smart progression, you can avoid soreness. Also, like extreme amounts of volumes tends to lead to soreness. Right? There's just more muscle breakdown over extreme amounts of volumes over a lower volume at a heavier weight. Now, the lower volume at a heavier weight has a higher neurological effect, or it fatigues your neurological system because it just takes more, firing of everything to move that weight, right? Your muscles, it's an all-known principle, but they'll fire at a harder rate the heavier the weight is, but it won't necessarily fatigue you physically, just more neurologically. And that has a different recovery process than a physical soreness, as opposed to neurological fatigue. So it's being able to understand all of those differences and try to put guys or gals in a position to be successful at their sport, in this case, golf. Having constant conversations. I ask all you guys every day, how are you feeling? And I don't just say that just because just to say it, I generally want to know, how are you feeling? Let's give me feedback. Let's talk about things. What do we need to adjust? How many times has Ben come in and say my back's pretty sore from this last weekend. What can we change? Okay. Let's adapt. Let's change that for today. What can we do things to get you still strong and train, but in a way that's not going to further impede you because, just played, 72 holes or whatever it is in 2 days. Or, dealing with issues that come up over time where you're losing flexibility in your golf swing. Okay, how can we mitigate that? So I think, again, just having conversations, understanding that, if you're playing a tournament where you're like, I don't need to do well in this tournament, so I can train through it, right? We call it I'll just train through this weekend to get your body into a position where, you can then handle the loads for the tournament that are coming up, where we're like, okay, well, let's just use it hey, I don't care how I score this weekend. We're going to train through. And obviously it's different in the college game. I'm talking about more professionally where, some guys just, go out there yes, they want to make the cut, but maybe they're, working on some things in those 2 rounds and they don't really care if they make the cut for this particular tournament or take this week off, right, from this tournament to physically and mentally prepare for what's coming ahead. And that could be from a training standpoint. So, I think there's just a lot of education and dialogue that needs to happen between the coach and the athlete on a constant basis. And then that's how you build a successful program. I just don't always want to give blind, send you something and talk about that. You know what I'm saying?
Can you hear him, Ben?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Hold on.
It, dude.
I can't hear either of you guys.
Is your AirPods dead?
Technical difficulties.
Oh boy.
Freaking Birdie Bros, man. Figure it out.
It's all right. We've had some technical difficulty. This is only episode 5, Joe.
All right, I'm gonna disconnect my AirPods.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. So I guess then the answer to Luke's question of is it better?
If you're conditioned to handle going hard and your body can respond well to it, then that works for you. If that doesn't work for you, then don't do it. If that's the point you want to get to, then you can slowly build to that point. But I can't expect someone, you take a novice, anything we do is probably going to be a challenge for them. So, I think it goes back to feel and how do you knowing how your body's going to respond, having the dialogue with your coach about it, and then just being able to adapt on the fly.
Yeah. So Joey, I heard you when I went to the bathroom. I kept my AirPods in so I could hear some of the workouts you were talking about. I think you forgot to talk about the benefits of long distance running for golf. I'll let you go on that for a little bit.
Well, again, I'm not a huge proponent of it because, all right, well, it's a give and take because golf in itself is a power sport mixed with an endurance sport in the terms of you're literally walking, a very low rate for 4 hours over several miles. But within that 4 hours, you have, we'll call it 50 powerful movements that happen with a golf swing, right? Assuming you have 20-ish putts. So you have 50 powerful golf movements, with the swing being 1.5 seconds, followed by at least 5 to 7 minutes of rest in between your next bout of power. So maybe the long distance running is good to, again, it goes back to the mental part of it, is like, if that helps you feel like you're in shape to be able to walk that distance and sustain it, then it's beneficial. But it has a conflicting response, because it's a completely different than what isn't required for the golf swing, which is a short, fast burst of power. But it doesn't mean it can or shouldn't be done. But it's also, you got to factor in the significant amount of stress that incurs over repeated running to your joints, especially to your lower body, which, as we talked about, is the base of your swing, of your game, is your lower body. That's where it all starts. Well, some would argue it starts in the head and then to the feet, but for the intensive purposes of the pure anatomy of it, it starts from the ground. So doesn't mean it's a bad thing, long distance running, but again, if it's a wear and tear over time on your joints, and if that's going to impact you, if there's other things that you can do to be fit, that's going to help you, whether it's maybe intervals or swimming or something of that nature. Again, having a base level of physical fitness is just never a bad thing. Like I said, I think if you know that you can not get tired from walking 4 miles, and in college you guys have to carry your bag, which is another loader. This is another stressor. Right? Your body doesn't know the difference of any sort of stress. It just knows it's a stress. But if that's something you have to worry about, of like, as you guys play, you condition yourself to just be able to handle that. But if you didn't have to worry about your fitness level, and regardless of how you got there, I think it's a benefit.
So you would say, like, longevity wise, for cardio, like, because would you agree with, like, everyone needs cardio, like, regardless of the sport?
They need a baseline level of aerobic fitness. So aerobic fitness, that's like that enhances the other qualities of like power. So like the bigger your gas tank is, essentially, like the more you can sustain your explosiveness, or you can, lactic acid is a myth. It's we actually use lactic acid and convert it into energy. Soreness comes from just the tearing of your muscle, micro tearing of your muscles. And then the change in pH is what causes that acidic environment in your body, but it's not actually lactic acid. So there's no such thing as like flushing. Lactic acid is truly a myth. It's a change in the pH due to an change in ions, hydrogen ions, that causes that acidic nature in the body, but not actually lactic acid. But the higher your bases of aerobic fitness, regardless of your sport, the more you can sustain and handle those repeated bouts. But that's not necessarily done by long distance running, more kind of like an interval running at different various tempos, 75, 65, 75% of like your max speed. That's a really good way to build that up. But yes, I would agree that every sport, irregardless, even though that's not a word supposedly, needs some level of fitness. And obviously, like I said, even golf. So it doesn't mean you have to be suited to run a marathon or even 100-yard sprint, but I think increasing your aerobic endurance and your aerobic fitness, it can only have benefits to your game.
Yeah. So I guess where I was going with that was, so you mentioned interval training.
Mm-hmm.
So like specifically for golfers, like I know Ben can't swim, so that's out of the picture. But interval training.
Swim?
So is there anything else besides interval training, or and then also what would be like an example of a simple interval training workout?
So like tempo runs are great, which is like, typically done over, 60 to 120 yards. So think like half to full length of a soccer field. And, if you have a number in in mind where you can like, hey, I can run 120 yards in 13 seconds. That would be like your max time. And then just, running at a pace of like 70% of that. So whatever 70% is, like, so let's say you run it in 10 seconds, 70% of 10 seconds is, whatever that is. Luke, you're the math guy. So
there's seven.
Yeah. So you would add that. So 70 would be 10.7 seconds would be your 70%. So you want to complete that in that 10.7, you want to be able to maintain your pace. And then, your recovery is, usually a 25 to 50 yard walk. And then, then running back your 100 meters or 120 yards at maintaining that 10.7 pace. And just working at those different variations, and you can do that over, 60 meters or 50 meters or 60 yards or, various degrees. It can do shorter duration sprints where it's, a 20-yard sprint and maximal recovery, mimicking the needs for golf. And that doesn't even need to, you don't even need to do a lot of those to elicit a benefit. There's so many different intervals that you can do. The one that's probably most closely related to golf, if you think of work to rest, is probably, if you did something for 5 seconds on and 55 seconds off, okay, that's like a 1:11 work to rest ratio, if you think about it. And that's essentially a golf, right? Is 1.5 seconds of work and, 5 minutes of rest essentially between shots. So, mimicking that work to rest is key. And then again, times of year is going to be different. Goals are going to be different. There could be times of year where obviously you're off season, where you're trying to build up that level. So you can increase the distance, the duration, the intensity. And again, for a lot of people, just doing the sheer minimum of, whatever the minimum effective dose is probably going to have huge benefits.
Joey, there's a huge highlighting of recovery and like understanding your body and understanding how you function at your best right now. Specifically talking about how several PGA Tour players and LPGA Tour players have been using Whoop. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's like the performance, it's like a band you wear on your wrist, and then it tells you all these stats, right? Well, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have your own personal training device that you use to calculate stats, or how do you see, is that the future? Is that like where we're headed, is checking our heart rate and checking our, rest time that we need? And how important is rest actually?
I mean, it's hugely important. There's so many processes that go on when you're sleeping, from a recovery standpoint or hormonal standpoint. So when that gets interrupted or shortened, it's literally been shown over time to increase obesity, risk of diabetes. All these metabolic diseases get heightened by impeded recovery. And so I think it's really interesting that you brought up the Whoop band. This kind of ties into our last conversation is, if you're in better physical condition, okay, you have a better chance of having a lower heart rate. And especially in golf, keeping that heart rate low and not getting too jacked up in the moment is huge. And so again, starting with a lower resting heart rate, or being able to keep your heart rate low when the stress is high is paramount, especially in golf. I mean, you see it now, they're starting to give these stats, like you said, JT's heart rate when he's putting or when he sees a shot about to go in versus when he's on the tee, or he's on the tee on 18, one shot up, the heart rate's going to be way different than, Thursday morning on the first tee. So I think technology is great to an extent, but it's not the end all be all, in my opinion. you got to use data for the right reasons. Don't just collect data just to collect data. Like, what are you doing with the information? How are you applying this data to make informed choices? I think the data can help you make better choices, but you can also get muddled and lost in all of it. So it's really, I think, the big term that strength conditioning is now kind of siphoned from business is KPIs, right? What are the key performance indicators that we're looking for? And, I think as time goes on, there's probably going to be more research in saying, elite golfers have a lower resting heart rate under stressful situations than novices, or the most, the top 10 guys on the tour, have a lower average heart rate on critical putts than, the bottom 50, whatever it is. And I'm sure that data is I'm sure it's already in the process of being collected as technology. So I think once that more information comes available, you're going to start to see the trend of people tracking that more and more. But all that stuff is great if you're doing all the other things. How many times have you heard me say, you can't out-train or outperform poor sleep, poor nutrition, poor hydration. So I think, if those three things aren't dialed in, I don't think your data means shit, because it's just a mask for everything else. But if you get those things dialed in, then I think the data can enhance your performance. But if you're not doing those things, then I don't really think the data is necessary. Now, it could be necessary in terms of having a conversation on how to get to those points.
Yeah.
But I think then you start having, too many thoughts go through. So I think just starting with one thing, dialing it in, whether it's sleep, nutrition, or hydration, checking that box. If all of those things are dialed in, which I'm sure for those tour guys they are, because this is their livelihood, then I think the data, you can find information to use that's going to be critical for your improvement.
Yeah. I think the new Whoop thing is so cool. I don't know if you guys have spotted it when you're watching golf, but I noticed it in this last tournament in the Wells Fargo, because Rory wears one, right?
Right.
And he was hitting a tee shot. It was so cool. So they had the beats per minute, his heart rate going on at the exact same time, like in live sync with his shot that he was hitting, and he was standing over it, and it was at 80 beats a minute, and he struck it, and it kind of stayed there. So in the act of him actually hitting the shot, he was kind of like cool and collected. And then as soon as this ball like went into the trees, he's got like over 100, beats per minute. So it kind of spikes up. So it's definitely, I think that's being able to think about that on the golf course, like your heart rate or where you're at physically, if you're too amped up or if you're too toned down, is very beneficial. I think that wearing something like that, the Whoop, when you're playing golf, is just a great reminder of, okay, take a deep breath, like cool down the heart rate a little bit. And because we know that, especially in a sport like golf, I think in other sports, you can get away with just like, most sports, you have to be in the zone of over 100 beats per minute. But when you're playing golf, especially if you're over a putt or like a chip or something, you need to be able to feel it out and not be amped up. So I think it's just a good reminder, and it's cool to see the pros and how their heart rate changes as they go through the round.
I agree.
I think
100%.
Something to be said though, like those things aren't that accurate, because like when you're running or exercising or like swinging a golf club, you're actually creating like G's. So if you're running, like your heart rate's going to be like at least 20% off, like on average, 20% off. So, I mean, I'm sure because there's smart people out there who might be able to kind of like normalize that. But to me, it's almost like, yeah, it's interesting, but at the same time, it's kind of, to me, it's a little bit trivial. Like I'm more on like Joey's, just like the bare bones philosophy of if you're in good shape, if you're well rested, if you're hydrated, then you should be able to perform. But no, like it's definitely cool to see like where their heart rate's at, like when they're making a putt. But it's also at the same time, it's like does that surprise you that their heart rate goes up on a Sunday versus a Thursday?
Right.
No, but it's cool to
Right.
see the effects, the psychological effects that are happening in golf, because no one's like telling them that their heart rate needs to jump. Like, it's all in their head. So if they were to put Rory's whoop and activate it on his putt, which there would be no G's activated in that. So I would think that if your theory is right there, Luke, that you could get a pretty good bearing of where his heart rate was at. That would be really cool to see, because it would be cool to see the people who are able to calm it down and then who aren't able to keep calm. And I think that in particular is very important in golf. And so that's why I think I just find it interesting that we're finally getting to the point where technology is kind of catching up to this idea in golf specifically, that you need to keep calm and cool and collected under all situations. And I think it's just a good reminder of that.
Yeah.
I think a more beneficial things to catch up is like what soccer players typically wear is like what more looks like the sports bra, because it's kind of more linked into the closer to the heart. Again, like you said, anything that's like kind of on your wrist is moving around and calculating things. So, but sorry, Luke, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that the sleep thing is really cool too. I haven't done a lot of research on that, but you know how it gives you like when you wake up in the morning, it gives you like a 98% rested or like recovered or whatever. I don't know how accurate those are, but I mean, that's pretty legit, I think, because it's always kind of a guessing game of how hard you're gonna go.
Right.
Unless you have like a formal, like you have, a team, like the guys on tour have like big teams around them who are all, they know exactly what they're doing. But like for guys like us, or like the common college athlete, like to know, okay, I'm only 80% recovered today, or another day I'm 99% recovered. Like it kind of determines, what kind of workout you're going to do that day. So that's pretty cool, I think, for sure.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, the best survey is, how are you feeling? How did you sleep? What did you eat? Right. I mean, how often have I asked you guys that, or if you've heard me ask other athletes that? Right. And subsequently, there's an interesting article I read years ago on this Meathead website. It's called like "How You Feel Is a Lie," and I think it holds pretty true. Like, I can get a great night's sleep, ready to attack the world, and have the shittiest lift there is. All of a sudden, 50% of my max feels like 100% of my max. And then conversely, I could get like 4 hours of sleep, be tired as hell, walk in and PR. Sometimes just like how you feel is a lie. And like, obviously there's a bunch of physiological and psychological things that go into that, but I just also find that interesting that, we as humans can do that.
Yeah. Have you guys ever just like not slept for like at least a day and then performed at like a really high level, whether it be physical or mental?
I mean, in college we had like like this, like Penn State does it. We do like a watered down version of like a 24-hour like dance marathon to like raise money for like the St. Jude Children's Hospital, where you're basically awake for 24 hours. And I could tell you at like, 4 a.m. in the morning, I was pretty dialed in on Foursquare. So I think there's some truth to that. But
yeah, I think, well, I haven't done anything like that really. The closest thing to it is probably that Goggins challenge, the 4x4x48 or whatever, where you have to run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours, because you really don't get much sleep. I feel like you're always trying to get sleep when you're doing that, but the most of the time that you can get is around like 2.5, 3 hours max. So it's like your body's kind of constantly trying to recover. And I know that that's not a great example of like fitness. Like you should be doing that.
I mean, you're in a constant state of fight or flight essentially right there, and you're just
exactly.
Over time that causes immense damage to your body if you're just staying in a sympathetic state.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I'll speak for myself, but I mean, the people that do it as well, for me, it's a mental thing, it's like, can I do this? Can I do this ridiculous challenge that doesn't make any sense? Can I complete it? And am I strong enough of like will and mental ability to do it?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I'm all for those kind of things. It's, you know, obviously not sustainable long term, but yeah, as a personal challenge to yourself, I think it's, you know, sure, why not? Go for it.
What about you, Luke? You've experienced this 24-hour drought, and then
the 24-hour flow state, or what?
No, it was kind of a weird time for me. I was well, I mean, it's happened a couple times because like there's been times where I've been driving back to Seattle and I had to stay up for long periods of time. But there's like a point you get to where you kind of go onto like a new level. Like last semester, I was studying for finals and I stayed up all night, took the finals, and then I couldn't sleep the next night, so I was just like, fuck it, I'll just stay up again. So I stayed up 2 nights in a row, and then went on a ski trip back in Seattle. And I remember I was just like, it's like I was like drunk or high or something. Like I was on a new level. Like I was just like so like hyper aware, I guess would be the way to put it. Because I don't know what it was, but it's just. And then like the car rides, when I don't have sleep and I'm in a car ride or even the ski trip, like I just start to there's like another layer of thought going on, like in the back of my head, and I'm more in tune with my thoughts, and then also I started laughing at things that I would not laugh at when I'm just, you know, well rested. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. I don't know what the cause of that is, but
yeah, I think it has some relation to the fight or flight response. You know, it's like, especially if you're driving, your body's gonna be like, your ass needs to stay awake so you don't die. And then you just probably all sorts of endorphins going off in your brain on that ski trip at some point.
Yeah. Well,
wait, I want
go
to
ahead,
ask
Luke.
Joey this question. So,
okay.
if you were gonna put in like a home gym, and you only had, you good?
Luke,
yeah,
you're a little bit.
You're hiding. Oh my.
I was trying to listen, even though I'm using headphones. I don't know why I was leaning closer.
It's a good sign. It's a good signal.
Yeah.
If you were gonna put in like a home gym, and you could only do you have to kind of like, you're on a budget, or you can only like put in like 3 or 4 things equipment wise, like what would be like the essentials? Like what would you throw in there?
I have a half squat rack that at least had a pull-up bar on it. Barbell with, you know, varying degrees of plates, you know, at least 45s, 25s, 10s, 5s, and probably a jump rope.
Jump rope for cardio or for warm-ups?
Both. I just generally enjoy jumping rope. I do it, you know, I used to do it just kind of part of my warm-up on my kind of explosive days, just get the body moving. I think it's a great tool, an underrated tool for developing athleticism. Very rhythmic skipping, very short, quick, you know, little bursts of, you know, plyometric jumping. So, and it's just I think you get a great bang for your buck for it.
Are you pretty good? Like, you have the, like, Floyd Mayweather, like.
Sometimes depending on the rope, I can get the little cross rope going. I do have short arms. I can get some good skips going. So I don't think I can consistently get double unders yet, but also the space in my garage doesn't allow for that. But I'm no jazzy jumpers like they have at the halftime of the basketball game, but I can hold my own.
What's your do you have like fitness goals like for yourself?
Yeah, it's a personal competition against myself. So when I got into the field, you know, I used to just use like the program cards that I would give to the athletes. I would write my program on that. And then I found that I, you know, had them, but they were just, you know, you'd have all these different papers to keep track of. So think starting in late 2012, early 2013, I started writing everything down in a notebook, like just like a normal marble notebook or whatever. And, you know, I have now 5, because I just write until it runs out. So I have maybe 5 or 6 different notebooks of every workout that I've done since 2013.
Damn.
And so I was actually funny you asked that. I was going back in those notebooks the other day, trying to remember some of, I kind of have like, I know like relative dates of when I did stuff. And so I was kind of going back and seeing like some of what my old PRs were for certain lifts. And then just trying to compete against myself and see, and also it goes back to see like how shitty some of my programming used to be. How has it changed personally? My personal program style kind of influences a little bit how I write our programs for our student athletes in some capacity, almost as a trial and error type of thing. And so, yeah, I kind of more just compete against myself. I've never competed in like powerlifting or anything like that. They say as a coach that you should. I just, for whatever reason, choose not to. I think I could do pretty well. But yeah, I just, again, competing against myself, whether it's like, are my weights getting more consistent over time? Am I able to consistently lift these weights now compared to 7 years ago? What was my old PR on this? When did I PR on that? How did I, I write little notes in there, like how I felt that day, how the lift felt. If something was off, I would write, felt off, or, basically like you're a pussy, sometimes in my notebook, if it didn't go the way I liked. And so, yeah, I just kind of just been over the years, just kind of literally journaling every workout that I've ever done, whether it's been body weight, push-ups, even if I, God forsaken, use the treadmill, wrote that down or whatever. So.
Well, Joey, we've been at it for a while. I just wanted to ask you, a main question, bringing it back to golf here. Because I know you're getting started and you're loving the game. What is your favorite aspect of golf? Why is this the sport that you're picking up now and that you enjoy?
It started as most people did during quarantine. I just needed an activity to get out of the house. Always like, again, I just love sports or activities in general. With wiffle ball, frisbee, I just spike ball, whatever. I love doing anything. My roommate played, and I was like, oh, screw it. I played a little bit in college. I picked it up, I should say, because all my buddies played, played in North Carolina. Some people grew up in the South. They played a lot. So I picked it up then, never did anything formal in terms of getting coached or getting training. It was like just, grip it and rip it and throw a club and see what happens. But as I get older and you just look for, things to do outdoors that are different hobbies, that again, like it goes back to, it's technically a game you can play your whole life in some capacity. You've gone to country clubs or courses and you've seen, kids 7, 8 years old out there playing. You see men and women, 70, 80 years old out there playing the game. And, like I said, the more I watch it and learn to appreciate it more and more, like I just find the skill of it so fascinating. And it almost becomes, again, a competition within myself of like, am I improving? And so, whether it's, am I improving my mechanics? Am I improving my ball striking? Am I improving my putting? Am I getting more consistent X, Y, and Z aspect of the game? And I think there's just so many little intricacies within the game that make it really fun. And, just sometimes you guys do it far more often than the common folk, but like when you just hit that one pure shot, you're like, all right, that's the shit that keeps me coming back. And then, for me, it doesn't happen again for like another, 17 holes, but, but within that, and then like, as I've been saying, like my scores haven't improved, but my skill has improved, now it's just putting it all together. And, again, just a way to go outside and walk around for 4 hours, you meet some interesting people on the course. You see some beautiful layouts, for beautiful courses. There's a lot of just cool aspects to that. If you play the munis, it doesn't have to be an expensive game. From this fact of like, playing at nicer venues. But every now and then it's nice to spoil yourself and play at those nicer venues. And I think it's just a really unique sport for this, for you all who actually compete in it. And then it's a very self-competitive hobby to challenge myself, a new way to challenge myself.
Sweet. I love it. Love that you're starting the game and that you're enjoying it so much. Luke, do you have any like closing remarks or anything, or?
I gotta ask Joey my famous question.
All right, here we go.
Joey, you have being a strength and conditioning coach for so long. Do you have like a favorite? Do you have a favorite memory, or like maybe like a year that just kind of sticks out, that like kind of makes you think, or kind of shed some light on why you love being a strength and conditioning coach so much?
I mean, it's pretty cool just seeing, and the athletes may not see it over time, but like, it's fortunate and unfortunate, because in this career you kind of have to work your way up. So I was never really in a spot long enough to like truly see the development, because I had to, 2 years here, and then you're moving up the ladder as an early on just to like survive and get paid. But I think it's just that moment of recognition, when an athlete like puts together like something that we've been working on, whether it's like, something super technical, like the clean, and someone we've been working on it for 4 or 5 months, and all of a sudden like they do like a flawless rep, or seeing someone who's never done a pull-up do a pull-up, and like the sheer joy that they see from like their hard work being put in. As I always say, like as a strength and conditioning coach, like I'll give you the recipe, but it's up to you to bake the cake. And I think it's really cool to see, when that cake is made, and whatever it is, if it's something that they've never done, whether it's just like hitting a PR accidentally, like, and a PR could be anything. It's like I went from 5 to 10 pull-ups. Like I'm pretty jacked right now, like jacked up. Like I'm pretty excited about that. Or, I've never gone, above, 135 on a deadlift, but man, that 185 felt real easy. Like I felt good, just those kind of little victories that you see on the daily, and the progress that people are making for the hard work that they put in. I think it just really stands out, and I think it's super cool to see and be a part of. And then, hopefully you're giving people like lifelong skills, and, making your mark on them to, again, most of you all college athletes, whether D1, D2 level, only have 4 or 5 years to, play this sport at the highest level that you can. After that, rarely will many people go on to the professional level. Now it's different for certain sports, there's a lot more opportunity, but at the end of the day, how can you make someone get the most of their collegiate experience? And then I think it's just, again, it keeps you young, right? You're constantly around 18 to 22-year-olds. They have all their quirks, and you think about when you were 18 and 22, regardless if you've played a sport or not. I think it keeps you young. Keeps me, hip, as the kids say. What are you youngsters up to? Whether it's, new J. Cole album just dropped. Can't wait to talk to somebody about it and listen to it today. Something I probably wouldn't have really stayed and followed into had I not, keeps me engaged in all sorts of aspects of life to try to keep up and keep relatable and conversations with, as I get older, and collegiate athletes, are still 18 to 22. How can I relate to them and continue to relate to them to help them? And then just a funny story I think that comes to mind. Probably one of the funny stories that I can think of is when I was in grad school, and we were front squatting with football, just whatever, I think we were in the off season, and we were just hitting front squat as part of our workout, and one of our D linemen was front squat, and he gets to the bottom of the squat and lets out a little fart and goes whoop. And I've never seen someone get up out of a squat so fast and run to the bathroom and with a clenched butt cheek and a hand going, oh, I think I gotta go. So someone literally almost shitting themselves at the bottom of a very light front squat. Just one of the funniest moments that I can remember in my 10 years. So
That's good.
Awesome.
That's good stuff, Joey.
Yeah.
All right, Luke. Well, you want to close it out?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Joey. Appreciate
Thank you, Joey.
You're going down to Texas tomorrow.
Well, eventually I'm making my way there. So
You're starting a little road trip tomorrow.
yeah, flying out Sunday, and actually playing around on Monday with my buddy out in Illinois, and then maybe I'm around in Michigan going to see my cousin, and around in New York with my other cousin, and then a round or two in Texas. So
Cool.
be making the rounds, donating balls to the wilderness.
Love it. We'll keep grinding. I'm sure I'll check in with you in a couple of years or whatever, see how the game's going. But
yeah,
thanks for coming on, man.
I appreciate you guys having me. Good luck building your brand and making this thing a monster.
Thanks, Joey. We appreciate it.
We talking harpsichord, I played that too, cuz.